Hello, thank you for downloading Witness from the BBC World Service. I'm Rob Walker. Today we're going back to May 1985 and one of Europe's worst football disasters. Some listeners may find the programme disturbing.
Good evening. Well, all day we've been waiting with tremendous anticipation for the highlight of the European football season, the Champions Cup final between Liverpool and Juventus, due to kick off in Brussels.
I was in the main square this morning and there were fans for both clubs swapping scarves and hats.
Era una stupenda giornata di sole. Mi ricordo.
It was a beautiful sunny day that day in Brussels. I remember the sunset coming down onto the green turf. I remember the atmosphere was one of excitement. I remember the feeling of a party.
It's the 29th of May 1985. Thousands of English Liverpool fans and Italian Juventus supporters have converged on the Belgian capital, Brussels. One of them is Simone Stenti, a Juventus supporter who was then a 20-year-old student. He travelled to the game with his father.
Io amo moltissimo quei momenti che precedono.
I love so much those moments that come before such an important match, when there is the excitement, the build-up. There were lots of English people. I still have a Liverpool scarf I exchanged with an English supporter.
It was only when Simone got to the ageing and dilapidated Heysel Stadium that he started to have concerns. He had tickets for Sector Z, but when he bought those tickets from a travel agency in Italy, he hadn't realised that this section was supposed to be for neutral fans. It was right next to the area allocated for Liverpool supporters and at the opposite end of the stadium from the area reserved for the Juventus fans.
Mi accorsi subito della stranezza della situazione.
I immediately realised how weird the situation was, because as I was queuing to get in, there were Liverpool supporters there. And we in Sector Z were mostly Italian families and some Belgian people, and I was quite surprised the English people could be so close to us, literally right next to us. The only division between Sector Z and the one next to it was a small metal fence, a thin, feeble fence made with chicken wire. That's what separated us, the Italians and the English.
By now, the elements which would contribute to the disaster were starting to come together. It wasn't just the lack of segregation caused by the ticketing policy. The policing was also completely inadequate, and the 55-year-old stadium was almost literally falling apart. When did you first realise that a problem was beginning or that the atmosphere was changing?
Il primissimo segnale è questo.
The very first sign was when a single hooligan from among the Liverpool fans climbed the fence dividing their sector from ours. That's when I saw the first police officer appear, and he had a baton, and he hit the hooligan. The hooligan took the baton, hit the policeman back, and the police officer went, and that was it. We didn't see any more police. And at that moment, we realised there was no buffer between us and them, and a lot more Liverpool fans tried to jump the fence. The sky was filled with bottles, stones, sticks. A sense of panic overwhelmed us. And at this point, the Liverpool fans were charging with no opposition, beating up everyone who was in their way.
If you just joined us, I should tell you of the awfulness and the violence. The worst that I have ever seen has occurred here in the Heysel Stadium in Brussels. Liverpool supporters massed away to our left, attacked Juventus supporters, of which there were a small section on that same side. They charged into the Juventus supporters, who fled in terror.
The fence between this section and the section holding all the Liverpool standing supporters was ripped down by Liverpool fans. And then they started to find missiles. I saw Liverpool fans carrying metal stakes.
Up until this match, Liverpool fans had a relatively good record, certainly compared to the supporters of many other English clubs. And what caused the charge by Liverpool fans is still disputed. Some said Juventus supporters in Sector Z had thrown missiles and attacked a young Liverpool fan. Simone Stenti says that's not what he saw.
Non c'è stata nessuna provocazione perché, ripeto, nella nostra.
There was no provocation, because in our sector there were families. People were shocked by this attack and they panicked. They ran away. The majority of people went towards the pitch to escape. We decided to go the opposite way, and so we got squeezed like sardines against a wall. At that moment, I thought I was going to die. The worst thing was that the crowd was squeezing your chest. I couldn't breathe properly. And when you can't breathe properly, you can't think properly. You're surrounded by old people, women, kids. You're powerless. All you can think is that you want to survive. But then we found a solution. There was a toilet. It looked to us like a phone box. So we decided to get on top of it. I could only move my left arm. And I pushed my father on top of this toilet. And then he found the strength to pull me up onto it. A strength I did not know was possible. I could feel something gigantic was happening, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And I only later understood the magnitude of what had happened.
It was about an hour before the match was due to begin when a section of Liverpool supporters broke down the steel fence surrounding their enclosure. They rushed across the few yards separating them from the Juventus fans and pushed the Italians back against an open-work concrete wall. The wall collapsed and hundreds of fans toppled onto the pitch. One of my colleagues, Wesley Kerr, was within feet of the incident.
Suddenly there was an almighty crash of masonry about 6 feet from where we stood. In that instant, many people must have been crushed to death, although at first they were not visible because of the bodies piled on top of them. It had become clear that a slaughter had occurred.
Ci ritroviamo sulla pista di atletica all'interno dello stadio.
We found ourselves on the athletic track in the stadium, and then we saw the survivors. They were in shock. To me, they looked like zombies with eyes of glass.
Death has cast its shadow over the Heysel Stadium in Brussels. It's been death here, and awfulness, and violence, and sheer terror. There are unconfirmed police reports that 35 people have been killed and several hundred people have been carried away on stretchers to hospitals.
There were also violent and lengthy disturbances at the other end of the ground where Juventus fans fought with police. Nevertheless, the authorities decided eventually to go ahead and play the match, fearing even more violence if it was abandoned. But by this point, Simone Stenti, like the other survivors from Sector Z, had more pressing concerns.
Sapendo che c'erano decine di morti.
We knew at that stage there were dozens and dozens of dead. My main concern was to find a phone to call my mum at home and let her know we were alive. But when I left the stadium to look for a phone box, they had all been destroyed. The Belgians were terrified. They wouldn't let anyone into their houses. It was like a war zone.
As we talk now, there's somebody else just been pulled out down there, wrapped in a brown blanket. It's a young girl wrapped in a brown blanket.
This is war correspondent stuff here. Death, serious injury, violence, footballers died, and the hooligans have won.
39 people were killed in the Heysel disaster, most of them Juventus fans. 14 Liverpool fans were later found guilty of involuntary manslaughter, but a Belgian inquiry found that the police and those in charge of the ticketing arrangements also shared responsibility for the tragedy. For Simone Stenti, the memories of that night are still vivid.
Devo dire che l'evento mi ha segnato.
I have to say, the event has scarred me. For a very long time I dreamt about it, and at one point I tried to remove it from my memory, to overcome it. Then I realized that was wrong. Now I believe we need to remember what happened. If you go round Italy and ask about Heysel, some people don't know what happened. Most don't even know 39 people died that night.
Today, Simone Stenti works as a journalist in Milan. You've been listening to Witness with me, Rob Walker. For details of our complete range of downloads and our terms of use, go to bbcworldservice.com/witness.